Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Michael's Record Collection, where we talk about great music with the people who make it and the people who love it. I'm very happy to be joined today by Jon Courtney from Pure Reason Revolution. Jon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
We are here to talk today about a new album coming out September 6th called Coming Up to Consciousness on Inside Out Music. Can't wait to talk to you about that. I've been enjoying that, absorbing it over the last week or so. And but I want to start out by asking you what I typically ask my guests, and that is, Jon, what was your first favorite record, the first album that really spoke to you on a personal level when you were just young?
Okay, yeah, it has to be Nevermind, Nirvana. Um, Prior to this, in my record collection, I'd had Ultimate Rave, which was like dance music from the late 80s, I guess 90s, the turn of 1990. Plus, I would say I was into Def Leppard. I was living in Sheffield. This is where I spent a lot of my formative years. And then one evening I came home and my brother had a tape cassette of the MTV Awards, either 91 or 92. And I saw Nirvana on stage and I couldn't believe it. The energy, the rawness, the power. This was music and it just transformed. From that moment, I said, I have to do music. I couldn't believe it.
So when you say you had to do music, how did you get started? Did you take piano lessons? Did Was there a guitar in the house? How did that all start?
I mean, yeah, if I rewind for my music, I sang in choirs, so I was a choir boy. I joke that my first job was as a choir boy, but I did used to get paid for weddings at weekends. So I would sing on Saturdays and we would get some money for being the church choir. So I did, I used to sing once in Royal David City in the church Christmas services. But then when my voice broke, then I stopped doing the choir thing. But my mum's musical, my dad's even musical too. So I grew up with mum playing the piano, dad playing the harmonica. And yeah, then I just probably sooner around this Nirvana time, I wanted a guitar. So I got we found a cheap secondhand guitar. And then I started playing from that point, really. Yeah.
And then did you take like formal lessons, or did you just kind of continue to learn on your own?
I had a few lessons at the beginning, and I remember enjoying those. And then I just sort of taught myself stuff. And then I had formal lessons at school, which I didn't like. Um, I just remember the teacher trying to, suggest I learn Eric Clapton solos and things like this. And at the time, this was so far removed from what I was into that I couldn't relate to it, and I had no wish to really become a lot technically better. That didn't really interest me. It was more, at the time to try and make songs that sounded like Nirvana. Really, that was the goal, not to play Eric Clapton solos or Dave Gilmour solos. Yeah,
Yeah. But you did grow to have an appreciation of David Gilmour over time, that's for sure.
I did, and this came much later. Probably around the time I don't know, hitting 18, 19. Then I was into grunge. I even moved into more dance music like Prodigy, Chemical Brothers, even Beastie Boys. I was a fan of this. And then I heard dad playing stuff, like Dark Side downstairs or Pet Sounds or maybe some Cream even. And then I started thinking, oh, this sounds cool. Like the production doesn't sound modern, but it doesn't matter because the songs are really good. So then I started listening, dad would find some of his vinyl disappearing. Um, yeah, and that was sort of the progression for me.
So how did you get from young person learning music, learning how to play, to forming the Sunset Sound?
Yeah, just from this, like I said, this Nirvana moment to, a few lessons to teaching myself I can actually go a bit further back from this. I was in this sort of punk pop band, um, and this was called Gel. And this band, I guess from sort of 16 to 18, we were doing London shows. We got on the radar of some record companies, and we actually did a record deal with Sire Music, which was part of Warner Brothers. We were signed by Seymour Stein, who was famous for signing Madonna and the Ramones. And he came into our dressing room after a show and said, "I'm going to sign you guys tomorrow." And we were like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who's this strange guy that just came into the dressing room?" And the manager said to us, "Do you know who that was?" And we're like, "No." He said, "That's Seymour Stein." And sure enough, the next day we were offered a contract with Sire Records. Um, we it didn't really go anywhere. We made an album. So this was my first experience of working with like bigger producers in a proper studio. This is 1997, 1998, where home recording wasn't so advanced. Um, so this is where I got a taste for the music industry, and we toured a bit in the UK. That band finished. We got dropped from Sire Records after one album. Then I began Sunset Sound, yeah, with Chloe, still my brother on drums, and then hooked up with a couple of other guys from my hometown. Yeah, and then that leads to Sunset Sound.
Yeah. And then on to Pure Reason Revolution, and of course the Dark Third album came across my radar. I was doing a progressive rock radio show at progrock.com, and it was just blew me away. It was this modern take on. I mean, it had the vibe of Pink Floyd, but it had a modern production, a modern sensibility, and it was unlike
Yeah.
anything else that was being made at that time.
Okay. That's very cool to hear.
Yeah, one of my favorite albums the year that it came out. I want to flash forward a little bit ahead to the hiatus. You guys went on hiatus just after the Hammer and Anvil album, up into the 2020 album, Yupnia. Tell me a little bit about what happened in that time, and what led to that, and what led to the reformation in the configuration that it was.
Yeah. What happened at that time? I think, we'd worked together a lot, and we'd all sort of grown with different interests, I think, within the band. Um, and it just felt time. We sort of had the feeling of why are we still doing this? Everyone was sort of pulling in different directions, so we thought, yeah, it's time to finish this for now. Um, and then people, everyone went on to do different things musically. Um, I did this, um, I did this duo Bullet High with Sammy, who was living in Berlin at the time. She's now back in Los Angeles. And this was more kind of like I don't know, Nine Inch Nailsy, industrial rocky thing, a bit Hell for Leather. And it came to we'd done a few shows with this album. It had a little bit of a response with press, etc. And then it got to the point of, well, do we do another one of these, or what happens now? And I'd done some new demos, and they didn't sound like Bullet High. They sounded more Pure Reason. They sounded more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, well, maybe it's time to speak to the other guys and see what they think about doing this again. I didn't feel like doing this angry Nine Inch Nails thing again. Pure Reason it did have a fan base, not a huge fan base, but it had a bit of foundation. So then I thought, let's try this again. And that's when I picked up the phone to Greg, to Chloe, and yeah,
And here you are back today, and putting out a third album since 2020. Um, Tell me a little bit about the evolution of the vocal approach, Pure Reason Revolution, because I don't think to that point I had heard so many male and female harmonies throughout a song. You would get it in a chorus, you might get it here and there, but you guys really leaned into that, and it became like a signature part of your sound.
yeah. I think I guess at the outset, we were Fleetwood Mac fans, huge Beach Boys fans, Crosby, Stills and Nash. This whole like West Coast harmony thing, love it. Like absolutely love that. I once, my dad had this Beach Boys box set, um, and on this, it was he had the Pet Sounds one and another one, and it was just so amazing to take away the vocal tracks and just hear the harmony. I love that. And we wanted to try and bring this to the Pure Reason sound. Greg and I met at university, and I think the first thing we did at uni, we were singing in harmony together, and he'd done barbershops before and stuff. So that was really cool, when we just sort of hit it off with this vocal thing. And Greg's brilliant. He's great at arranging harmonies. He's much quicker than I am with doing it. And and so yeah, so with Pure Reason Revolution, yeah, this was part of our sound, this vocal harmony thing. Um, I don't know how it's evolved. It's when I think about if I make comparisons to the Dark Third to now, I would say it's similar, but what do you feel the differences are? Is it more, do you have more singled out sections there than you do now? Or
I feel like there's a lot more solo vocals now than there were in the beginning.
okay.
But there are still you still do a good job of throwing, even in verses, there'll be lines that are harmonized,
Yeah.
but there are other lines that are not, and you'll take turns. The male vocal, the female vocal will be on their own here and there. I
Yeah.
think more than you did at the outset. So I think that, but I always was curious, like, did you just discover that you guys and Chloe's voices just all just sounded good together, and that's what you just went, wow, that sounds good. Let's just stick with that.
I guess so. I think at the beginning, going back to this Dark Third, it was like vocal, let's harmonize everything. And I remember some people at the label were a bit like, well, you need to cut that back a bit because we were a bit like the whole thing's like three-part harmony. And I think that over the years, I've honed it a bit to get more character out of lead vocals. Back then, we would very much like triple track all vocals, I think. So often you get this slight synthetic sound to the voice. And yeah, okay, so this is a difference over the years. Nowadays, I would never triple track a lead vocal. I would always leave that a single track, central single track, maybe doubled. But for me, this brings out much more character in the voice. You can just hear more. And for me, that brings more character. And it gives more extremes for when the rest comes in. So if you've got a single track, lots of character, and then you hit the chorus and it's like, let's say 12 tracks with octaves plus harmony, there's more impact, I think. So I guess that's a change. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So coming up to consciousness, as I mentioned, your sixth album coming out September 6th on Inside Out. No Chloe Alper this time. She's been busy with the band James. You have enlisted someone who's helped you live, Annika Shireen, on vocals. And I will tell you, there's two things that stuck out to me about my first listen to this new album. One is that if you had told me that wasn't Chloe, I would have said, what? And the other was, if you didn't tell me anything at all about the album and just put it on, I would have asked if this was a Steven Wilson solo album.
Um, I think with the vocal thing, I Greg mentioned this. He said when I first Annika is a friend of a friend, and so that was the introduction. It was really nice and casual. Then I think she tried something. She tried some vocals on a track, and I sent those to Greg, and I was like, "Well, what do you think about this?" And I think the same as you, he was all like, "No." He knew it wasn't Chloe, but he was like, "Wow." He's like, the tonality is like they've got a very similar sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And this wasn't intentional. Like I said, it was just this friend of a friend. We had a Zoom or something. We hit it off. She did some vocals. Um, and then then she said, I'm available for live. Um, and then it went from there. I think for the last album, it was a bit confusing for people with Chloe singing on the album, but not doing it live.
Mm.
So it was decided for this one that it made more sense for Annika to sing on the record and do it live.
Yeah.
um, perhaps less confusing for the listener and the the fan of the band. Chloe, who knows? One day we might have both vocalists on stage. Um,
Well, I'm sure that your fans would love that. And in terms of fans can be fickle. So what can you tell the fans about Chloe's status in the band? Is she still a member of Pure Reason Revolution and just is taking a step back, or is she currently out and maybe back in the future?
I don't know. The last thing we said, the last time we spoke was, look, it totally makes sense for Annika to sing on this record and to do it live.
Yeah.
Chloe said, look, I'm sorry I'm so busy, but I'm going to be there cheering from the sidelines. And we said, the door's not closed. So I went to go and see Chloe play a show in Manchester when I was back with my parents. So, we're still in contact. And I don't want to say never, never say never. Like, it's totally possible that we do another record again. But what's so important to me is that, Pure Reason has this 20-year history, and I want to take it forward. We've got a very supportive label. I don't want to just call it a day because Chloe's too busy.
Yeah.
I had to find a way forward, and we found a brilliant way forward with Annika.
Yeah.
I love working with Greg. I love working with Ravi. I love working with Annika, and it's a great live band. So let's keep it going.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the personnel. Jon Courtney, vocals, guitars, keyboards. Greg John, guitars, and vocals. Guy Pratt. You got the legendary Guy Pratt to do bass on 7 tracks. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about that in a minute. John Sykes did bass on the other track. Ravi Kasavaram on drums. I hope I'm pronouncing that anywhere close to being correct. Annika Shireen on vocals. And this was, it's very Pineapple Thief oriented, as it was mixed by Bruce Sword and mastered by Steve Kitch. So let's talk about Guy Pratt. How did you come across Guy and get him to play bass on your record?
Um, One evening I was scrolling through social media and I saw that my friend Craig Walker, who is also living in Berlin, had been to see Saucerful of Secrets. He also mentioned in his post that, he met the band. And so I was like, oh no, I was really annoyed because I wanted to see Saucerful of Secrets. I'd missed them in Berlin stupidly. So I got on the phone straight to Craig and I said, first of all, why didn't you tell me about this concert? And then secondly, how did you get to meet the band? So he said, I know Guy. Um, yeah, and then I got to meet the rest of the guys, got to shake Nick's hand, and said, this is amazing. Um, but you should have told me. Anyway, we then look at the tour schedule, and I said, Craig, they're playing in Leipzig tomorrow, which is 2 hours drive from Berlin. I said, I'll drive us down there if you can get us tickets, if you can speak to Guy and get us into the show. So he said, yeah, no problem. We've got tickets. So sure enough, we drove down to Leipzig, saw the band, got to meet the band afterwards. I got to shake Nick Mason's hand. And then from this moment, then Guy and I had a little bit of a dialogue. I'd given him some music, I think, by this point. Um, and then yeah, we just got chatting and said, let's try doing something together. And then one track turned into 7 tracks. And yeah, then
That's great.
then it just went from there basically. And at first he was going to come to Berlin, but schedules didn't match. He got busy doing Dave Gilmore, understandably, didn't have time.
Oh, it's just Dave.
I know, I can't believe he didn't put PRR first.
I don't know.
But then, that gave an opportunity for Jon Sykes to play on the track. So
Mhm.
that was cool. And working with the Pineapple Thief guys was really nice. We sent we sent Bruce some material quite early on, and he said he'll just try doing a mix. That came back fantastically. So he said, yes, please, can you do the whole thing? Um, and it was great. He said very early on, doing Pure Reason, doing this record comes so naturally to me. And that was great because, we're in this similar genre.
Mm.
And he did a few guitar bits and they were spot on when he did those. I was very open for him to, try little bits and bobs. So I thoroughly enjoyed the process working with those guys. Really.
Yeah, that's great. So this the album deals with themes of betrayal, deception, fear, grief, mortality, question of sanity, all really happy stuff, John.
Yeah,
Was this like a therapy session for you? Is songwriting therapeutic or a part of your process for getting out negativity and getting it out of your internal part and out into the world so that you don't have to deal with it internally? Is that part of it?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very grateful that I can do this as a musician, that I have this outlet, that I can get it out in lyrics and music. Um, yeah, it's a really cathartic process for me to be able to do this. Um, if I rewind to, sort of the catalyst that, yeah, it does. I was in Sony the other day talking about it a bit, and it sounded like, oh, this is a really depressing album. I hope that there's positivity and hope that comes out at the end of it. And it began with having our dog put to sleep, um, and then if, this bringing up lots of tangled emotions, feelings, this betrayal, this deception, and obviously the grief part. And then just as I was feeling better about that, maybe let's say this is 8 to 12 weeks, I had this, possible exposure with asbestos. And this was really my life's biggest fear. And already with death and mortality sharp in focus, this was just right there. And I thought death was imminent, not just for me, for my family. Quickly, I was a psychologist, psychiatrist, um, and had an OCD diagnosis, which is something I guess I'd been suppressing for years. And now, almost 2 years later, I can see this whole time as a great learning curve and a great time of growth. At the time, it was painful as hell, um, but through music, I was able to get it out and really then take a huge sigh after this. Um, yeah,
John, what was the first thing you wrote for this record? Do you remember the first bit that you wrote?
I think the first thing I wrote was, I think it was As We Disappear, so the last track. But that was originally called Rosengarten, which is where we scattered the ashes of my dog. But changed it to As We Disappear to tie in with the title of Jill's artwork, which is the dog in the cover.
Yeah, it's a striking cover. Very different from what we've seen past from Pure Reason Revolution. And by the way, my condolences. I've having gone through the pet grieving process many times. I certainly sympathize with what you went through. Very personal album for you, lyrically. Um, Aside from the loss of your dog, what were some of the other themes that were kind of in your mind, or the things that you wanted to say with this record?
I mean, I would say that, this concept record, it cycles around these 6 points. So you're always coming back to this betrayal, deception, grief, mortality,
Mm-hmm.
question, sanity, this fear. These are all like central themes in the album. Um, I mean, if I look at Dig Till You Die, this one started. Stuff always gets a metaphorical mangling with Furies and Revolution, but one aspect of this was when I was going to see Greg, I ended up having an unexpected stopover in Seattle. Not in Seattle, sorry, in Iceland. I was on my way to Seattle.
Mm.
I got chatting with this guy from Seattle. We connected, similar age. He was into grunge too when he was younger. But then started talking about family and kids and stuff like that. And he told me about his father-in-law who had sort of planned this perfect retirement, worked his ass off like all his life to have this ranch and to have his days there. And then within a few months, he passed away. And it just, really got me thinking of like, don't just graft and graft and graft all your life to then have this, this moment in time that may not happen. And it really taught me about, living in the present and, doing the things I love. And I'm not going to be on my deathbed thinking, I wish I'd written more riffs in the studio. I'm going to be thinking, I wish I'd played more dinosaurs with my daughter in the gardens. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
These
sure.
are the precious things. Um, yeah,
Yeah, Dig to Die. I was curious as to whether that was an intentional reference to the Pink Floyd lyric and Breathe in the Air, dig that hole, forget the sun. I wondered if that was an intentional connection or if maybe a subconscious connection.
I think it's subconscious one. Yeah,
So no,
I didn't take it on purpose. So it was a subconscious one. But there's always these ones with Floyd. Like, yeah,
where does a song start for you? Does is it a melody that kind of comes into your head? Is it something you get from noodling with an instrument? Is it lyrical? Where does it start?
it can be both. It can be. I don't have a set way. It could just be a melody, and I'll sing it into my phone. Years gone by, I used to carry around a dictaphone that I would record this into. Yeah, and then sit down on the guitar, start playing around with chords, and I'll be humming a melody, singing a melody, and then very quickly you start getting this interplay between lyrics and music, and you write down a sentence, and that inspires you, and then that pushes a bit more music, and then the music takes a turn, and then you that inspires you lyrically again. Sometimes I just work on tracks by myself in Berlin in the studio, and I like that time. And then other times I'm really fed up with myself, and I love doing a collaboration. So then I'll go and see Greg, and maybe we'll work on 3 or 4 songs together. Not massively with preconceived ideas before we get together. It's usually best if we just sit there and start from nothing, like him on the piano, me on guitar. We we've worked together for 20 years now, so our references are really close. So yeah, it can be, oh, Greg, try something a bit more Gilmore on the guitar, or no, like try a bit more grungy. What would Kurt Cobain do now? Or something like this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Or yeah, we can quickly switch references, and we don't need to, stop at and say, oh, what artist are you talking about? Like we know them all. So yeah.
well, it's great that you have that shared history. Tell me about the five interlude pieces that connect these songs together. What inspired that? Was it just an attempt to make it one continuous piece of music, or is that just part of the concept cycle, kind of flowing from one idea to the next?
I think with this connecting tracks, this is something we wanted to do right from the start. It was one of the things we set out to do, was to create long pieces and create music that entwined with the next piece. And we did this on the Dark Third. You get maybe the first 3 tracks almost connect together.
Mm.
So this is something we carried through right from the outset. Um, and we want to take people on a journey when they listen to this. With this record, there's a concept behind it. I want it to take the listener on a journey. I want there to be as few interruptions as possible. I want you to get immersed in it. I want you to pick up the lyrics. I want you to stick on the headphones. I want you to listen to the whole thing. So the less stops and starts there are, the better. Um, and that's it really. There's no other plan behind it. It's just let us take you on a journey for 40, 45 minutes. Um, yeah.
That you kind of answered what I usually finish with, which is what you want the listener to take away from the listening experience. You kind of addressed that now, but I do want to say that for me, I found this to be an album where there were songs that were immediately accessible to me. I first listen, I think Betrayal and Useless Animal were the ones that stuck out to me. And Dig Till You Die, and those Dig Till You Die and Useless Animal were the two singles that you've already released, so that makes sense. And then as I listened more, other songs started to emerge as favorites that I liked even more. I think the end of this album, the Bend the Earth, Lifeless Creature, and As We Disappear are probably my three favorites now after listening to this thing for a week, pretty constantly. So you still are able to put so much depth and so many layers into your music that things can be discovered upon repeat listens, which I think is a mark of a great album.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of intricacies go into this. It really is detail, and I talked about this OCD thing from before, and while this in the past it continues to be a detriment in some ways because I see details in things, and I ruminate over things. But with music, it can be a real positive. With not just music, because I can focus in where other people would probably go, "Fuck it, I'm not. I don't have the attention for this." I can really give it attention and see these fine details and really push push in and dig in so deep that I get it just right, just how I plan it to be. And Bruce also mentioned this. He was like, like you mentioned, people will listen to this record and dig out different bits on listen three, listen four, listen 10. They'll hear new things, and that's fantastic that people can do this. I love that.
Yeah, that's I like I said, I think it's a mark of a great record when you can continue to find new things in it as you go, and continue to be surprised by it because um, you know, a 2 minute pop song is great, and it has there's a lot of value in it, but once you kind of decipher it after a couple listens, it doesn't surprise you anymore. You can enjoy it. It just doesn't bring anything new to the table.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm super pleased that people can listen in this way and find new surprises. Think, oh, what's that background vocal or something like this, or what's that guitar in the left side that I didn't notice last time? That's great.
Yeah. John, is there going to be a tour for this record?
We have some shows in Europe. So we have a festival at the end of September in Spain, and that's followed by some Germany shows, France, Netherlands, and then we've got some UK shows at the end of this year. Next year we've got Cruise to the Edge, which does it go from Miami or
um I think it's gone out from St. Petersburg in the past, but it could go out different ports. I'm not sure. I've never had the money to go. I'd love to go.
well, we've got this one, which is going to be an experience. I've never been on a cruise, let alone a prog cruise, so it sounds very interesting. But while we're over in the States, it would be brilliant if we could do some extra shows. I mean, maybe we'll have to wait till it's a support tour with someone like Pineapple Thief. That would be a great to open for Pineapple Thief would be a perfect sort of opportunity. So the fingers crossed we can make something like that happen.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this. I know that the Neil Morse band and I know the Flower Kings, a couple other bands have done a show either before they sailed or when they got back. I think Marillion also came off Cruise to the Edge and did a show in Orlando. And I'm selfish. I live in Orlando. I'd love to see you guys here.
Yes, I'd like to think we can make something happen. It seems crazy to come all that way to then not have at least a couple of shows. So
Yeah. All right, Jon Courtney from Pure Reason Revolution. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this. I wish you nothing but the best of success with this record. I'll be listening to it. Hopefully, my viewers and listeners will be listening to it as well. And yeah, good luck and thanks again for your time.
great. Well, thanks so much, Michael. I really enjoyed the interview. Yeah, hopefully see you at a show.